Hello everyone, welcome back to Specter FM. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Robert Welsh, and this is a ghost story podcast where I read out real ghost stories sent in by our listeners. If you have a story yourself, you can send it by email. Either just type out an email or record audio and send it to me at SpecterFMStories@gmail.com. Do consider subscribing wherever you are, whatever platform you're on. And let's get into our first story. This is just called Ghost Story. This story actually happened to my mum when she was a teenager in the 1950s. She had went to a travelling carnival that was in town with several of her friends. One of her friends had another friend visiting from another town, and she had joined them. At the carnival, they ran across a fortune teller. They decided it would be fun to have their fortunes read, so all of the girls had theirs read, except the girl who was visiting from out of town. My mum said she was hesitant to have hers done, and eventually they talked her into it, so she went in. The fortune teller looked at her, took out a piece of paper, and wrote something on it. The fortune teller looked at her and said, "Do not open this until you get home." So the girl put the paper in her pocket and walked out. Everyone wanted to see what the fortune teller had written, but she kept the note in her pocket. It was getting late, so they decided they would leave and go home. Everyone got in vehicles to leave. The girl from out of town got into a vehicle with her brother, and they headed back to where they were from. They were about 5 miles down the highway and were involved in a horrible head-on accident. Her brother lived, however, she sadly died. The next morning, my mum and her friends had found out what happened. They found out that her brother had snuck back over to the carnival. One of her family members had asked what she was doing over there, so they were telling them all the things they had done. My mum's friend had said there was a note that the fortune teller had given her, and did they find it in her pocket? The family member said yes. They did find a strange note. The friend asked what it said on the note, and the family member answered. The note said, "You have no future." My grandmother verified this was a true story and actually happened. There was an article in a local newspaper about the note. Till this day, I've never had my fortune read, and I never will. Thank you so much for that story. Personally, if I was a fortune teller, I would have just been like, you're going to meet someone and, basic fortune teller stuff. What if she opened that before she got home? I wonder if she would have gone back and asked for clarification. You never know. We have an audio story up next, and this one again doesn't have a title. That might be the theme through this.
Hello, Robert. This is Melissa. Here is the first ghost story that I would like to share with you. Let me start by saying that my father passed away on New Year's Eve 2014. It was devastating and earth-shattering. Because of my beliefs at the time, I couldn't find solace in the fact that he had gone to a better place. To me, he was just gone. At the time, I wasn't 100% sure I believed in spirits, despite having had several strange experiences in my life. I'm very stubborn. After a few months went by, I had started to accept his passing and vainly hoped he might try and communicate with me. That following March was me and my husband's wedding anniversary. As we do every year, we went to watch the special DVD my father had made us of our wedding. However, no matter what I did or where I looked, I couldn't find it. I was devastated. We had done a purge getting rid of almost all of our DVDs we owned recently, and I feared we'd accidentally gotten rid of our wedding DVD. I sat in the living room, ugly crying. One piece that was left of my father and my wedding might be gone forever. At that moment, the window in the living room began making a buzzing and rattling noise I had never heard before. It wasn't a particularly windy day, so I wasn't sure what was causing it, but it kept happening. We live in a newly built house, so it wasn't an old window either. Then I felt what could only be described as cold fingers running down my spine, almost like a hand, all 5 fingers pressed against my back. I stood up and instantly stopped crying. Almost as if possessed, I walked into our rarely used spare room, peered into a forgotten cabinet, and immediately laid hands on the DVD. I began to cry again, but this time, happy tears. I'm positive it was my father reaching out to me and helping me find that DVD. We sat and watched it as always, and still do each year, but now it has another layer of meaning. I have other stories I can't wait to share with you. And can I just apologize for my dog being extra in the background? Okay, bye.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for that story. Perfectly read, beautifully, thank you. And you never have to apologise for your dogs. They're beautiful baby angels. I absolutely agree with you. I think that was your dad there helping you find that DVD and not wanting you to suffer, thinking you lost it. Our next story today is called Horror House. My mum had me when she was a teenager, and for 2 years we had to live with my grandparents. Finally, my parents managed to get a 2-bedroom council house while they finished their studies and saved to eventually buy their own. They also had my baby brother. Lots of strange and horrifying events began to happen while we lived in this house. Strong smells of tobacco smoke in the living room, yet no one smoked. The most awful feeling of being watched in the kitchen, which was so bad my mum could only wash up and leave, then try and return later to dry up. A random kitchen fire happened with no reason. In mine and my baby brother's bedroom, we could hear a chorus of voices, all different pitches, volumes and tones. I remember them making me cry, telling me to shut up. My dad, who was not a believer, once woke up to see my mum at the front of the bed. He told her to stop being silly and get back into bed. Turned on his side and saw my mum was fast asleep next to him. Confused, he turned back to the figure he found that it had suddenly come right up to his face. Scared, he pulled the covers over his head, not sure what to do. I developed an imaginary friend, Lucy. Lucy used to play games with me, look after me, and protect me from bad people. My dad shrugged it off as a typical kid with an imaginary friend. However, one day, when I was talking to him about her, what she looked like, etc., he realized I was talking about a great aunt Lucy, who was also a nanny to my great-granddad. Things took a turn for the worse when 2 incidents happened. One, I was sat in the car and we pulled up outside the house after being out for the day. My dad went to get me out the car seat. At the end of our street is a sort of dead end that is very curved with houses all around it. Opposite where my house was, near this dead end, is a short path and steps leading to the street behind. I looked up and saw a man staring at me on that path. Something about him was evil, and I began to scream and cry. If I got out of the car, the evil man would get me. My dad was trying to calm me, saying he wouldn't let anything happen to me, while he kept trying to get his screaming child out of the car. The second incident was when my mum was trying to put coats on me and my brother to go across the road to where my auntie lived. 2 pictures that were hung up opposite sides of the corridor floated off the wall, met at the center, then crashed to the ground. Terrified, my mum picked me and my brother up, one child under each arm, and ran across the street to my auntie's. We soon moved out into my mum and dad's first bought house, thinking that all the terror was finally behind us. Fast forward to when I was in my 20s, I just moved out while pregnant with my first child into my own horror house. Things would move, doors and cupboards would bang, you could hear growls and see shadow figures. When my boy was a toddler, he had an imaginary friend he creepily named Normal Boy. Normal Boy would scare him, and he'd often run to me crying that Normal Boy was playing with his toys. Whilst I tried to comfort him, I'd hear the toys that make noises going off in his room. I hated it and couldn't wait to move ASAP. My mum was banging at my door one day. I let her in and she was overexcited to tell me something. She had been at a beauty salon and was talking to her beautician. She was sad that she had split from her boyfriend. My mum asked what happened. She told her she was fed up of living in his creepy house. She said she could smell tobacco really strong. She couldn't stand being in the kitchen because it felt like someone was watching. And the hairs on the back of her neck would always stand on end in there. She saw things move, heard voices. It had become so bad, she decided to give him an ultimatum as he didn't seem to mind the activity. Either they moved or she would leave. In the end, she left. My mother told her of our creepy house when I was younger, and of all the similar sounding activity that happened there. Out of interest, my mum asked whereabouts the house was. The girl told her, and my mum went white and said the house number we had lived at. Yes, it was exactly the same house. I have now moved into a nicer house, and I often wonder if the people living in my old house also experienced the same things I did. Thank you so much for sending that story in. Seems like something or someone wants to be following you everywhere it can. But I'm happy to hear it's all cleared up. As I mentioned, I'm not feeling my best today, so I want to end this episode with another audio story. And this is called Something Under the Bed.
So my story started when we moved into a new house, 15 minutes from our old house. The first couple of days, nothing much happened. We didn't feel no feelings, no nothing. We were excited about the new house, our new rooms. My room was one of the biggest ones, and so I was pretty happy about that. So one of these nights, while we were there, it must have been maybe 3 months later after we moved in. Let me tell you first about my dog. My dog is such a scaredy cat. She's even scared of cats. She hates loud noises. She hates lightning. She's a huge scaredy cat. She does not even mess with frogs. So, anyways, fast forward. We're 3 months into the house. One night, I used to sleep with the lights off in this room. Me and my dog, I usually have her on the floor. If not, she's on the bed. It's kind of just pick and choose whatever she felt like. So we were sleeping, and out of nowhere, I feel her patting the side of my bed. And that she usually does that when she wants me to pick her up and put her on the bed so she can sleep on the bed with me. So I feel her. She wakes me up. I pick her up, and I realize she's shaking. And I'm so drowsy and sleepy. And at the moment, I'm thinking, it must be lightning. That's probably why she's shaking. She's scared. It must be lightning outside and thundering. It's probably raining. But I'm not realizing at the moment that there's no rain and there's no lightning and there isn't that, like, it is a quiet, peaceful night. I didn't realize that yet. So at that moment, I'm thinking she's scared because it's raining. I pick her up. I put her on my chest. I'm trying to calm her down. She's a small little Maltipoo, a little curly dog. And so I'm trying to calm her down. She's panting. She's shaking. And I'm like, it's okay, Maggie. It's okay. And I'm falling asleep. And as I'm falling asleep, at the end of my bed, I hear a breath. Literally like this. Like, and I froze. And at that exact same moment, my dog stopped shaking, turned her head around in the direction that I've also heard it. It was at the end of my bed, like underneath. My room was still empty. We were still unpacking. So maybe it wasn't 3 months in. Maybe it was like 3 weeks in. I'm not too sure. But I remember I was still unpacking stuff from the boxes. And my dog looks at the end of my bed, starts shaking even more. And that's when my eyes just shot open. Like, what the heck was that noise? And the room was pitch dark. It was black. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Dark. And so I grabbed my phone on the side of my bed. I had like the only thing I had set up in my room was like the bed, a dresser, and a little nightstand. And that's where I had my phone charging. So I grabbed my phone, I turn on the light, and I'm praying before I look underneath my bed. I say a quick little prayer, and then I look underneath the bed real fast, and there's nothing there. There's nothing. My room, I look around the room with the light, there's nothing. I'm not seeing anything. And then Maggie's still kind of shaking. So at that moment, I'm like, okay, she woke up because something was in my room and scared her. I know I'm not the only one that heard breathing because she also heard it, reacted to it. So after that day, I never slept with the lights off again. I had a nightlight. It was a scary situation, a scary experience. We had a couple more experiences there at the house, and I have a few from the original house too, and I'll send those in at a later time. But I hope you have a happy Monday and enjoyed my story.
That made me gasp when you mentioned the breath. A few things about that story. One thing that I would always be so annoyed about is that if a ghost was interfering with my family, and that includes pets, if a ghost was making my dog that scared, I would be livid. I'll be Googling, how do I exorcise a house? How do I get rid of ghosts in my house? How do I punish a ghost? And of course, your baby. I wouldn't want any of my family to be messed with by a ghost. That was a really good story. Thank you so much for sending that in. And you can send your stories over to me, just like this audio one, or just type it out. SpecterFMStories@gmail.com. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. And we will see you very, very soon.